of an update from the coalition. So,
Sorry. Go ahead.
go.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Sandra. Sandra, we'll start with you with an update from the coalition.
Okay. Um, and that was me that hit the record button. So the first part, all that wonderful stuff I just said won't be recorded. So hope y'all remembered it.
Oh,
The Coalition Board of Directors had a meeting in April, so we were working with that. And the just kind of for your information, because you may not know, the coalition by our bylaws has to meet 4 times a year, but this year we're going to have 5, and that seems to work out. And we always have a meeting the month after the annual meeting to determine and elect our officers for the next year. So that the board has been very busy this spring as well, working with the interviewing process that we've just completed, and we'll be talking about shortly. Also, I'm involved with the North Carolina Association on Aging, as some of you on the call are, and we've been meeting to talk about the annual conference on aging is going to be next March. We're not having one this year, but it's going to be in March 2027, and we're just beginning the search for locations for that. So if you have any ideas or been anywhere really nice lately, just let me know. I'll be glad to pass it on to that group. We were talking earlier about how expensive those conferences and events have been and are getting for folks that are trying to put on events. I also attended the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits had their annual meeting via Zoom. And for those of you that are nonprofits out there, and this probably speaks to others as well, they did a survey, and some of the top needs in that survey from the nonprofit sector were fundraising, help with communications and marketing, and advocacy. So coalition is no different. That would be in our top as well. But the advocacy part, I like to think that the coalition can help be your voice. If you are not, able, we don't have a large staff either. It's getting ready to grow. It's getting ready to double. But we are there for advocacy and that training. And that is one thing that we have been working on is planning for our Advocacy Education Day on May the 12th. You probably saw that in an announcement that went out earlier. It's in our newsletter that went out yesterday. And that is a way to help people feel more comfortable about being an advocate, how it works at the General Assembly, and how important it is for individuals to be part of that process. So that has been going on. But the nonprofits, as I said, you want it to be upbeat and positive, but we're all singing the same song of what's needed. And I think I'm looking at Janice Tyler on my screen right now. You know, local governments are feeling the same kind of thing, especially in the funding in the funding arena. So we all just have to keep going, keep hanging on as best we can. Um, and also, one of the things I've been busy with the last couple of weeks and will continue for the next couple of weeks is onboarding for our new executive director who is coming on board on May the 4th. Hello, Kay. And part of that is, we have been a one-person office, one paid staff, one full-time volunteer staff in Mary Bethel for the last few years. But having 2 full-time staff, we're, in the process now. We've got to buy another computer. We have to get another phone. Um, Updating policies and procedures that are going on. I'm personally organizing the files on the computer, so when they're shifted over, it makes sense to Kay because my filing system makes sense, but it may not to her. So I'm trying to work with that so she can find things more easily. And of course, as all of you know, whether personal or professionally, updating all of the coalition's online profiles with emails and passwords, because all of that has to, as I said, be updated and changed. So, and of course, that lovely multi-factor authentication. So we've got to make sure we've got the right phone numbers associated with all those accounts, which makes perfect sense that I will be transitioning. I am transitioning to the operations position, and that's all part of operations. So, and on that note, my new email, which it is active, I don't look at it actively yet, but it's operations@nccoalitiononaging.org. So
It will be
if you
effective
send
for May
something
4th.
to the executive director email for me, obviously
Mhm.
Kay and I will be working very closely together as we move forward. So we'll make sure to get the information to the right person. So that's all I have on that front. Mary, if you want to talk about some other things going on with the coalition.
Right. Well, since you mentioned Kay, I think it's a great time to formally introduce Kay as the executive director of the coalition effective May 4th. Kay waved everybody, so I think most people know who you are. Kay has been around for a long time in the aging field in North Carolina. She worked 12 years, Kay, is that right? The NASW in North Carolina. She had a long title, but basically she had headed up their policy and government relations type things, as well as other hats that she wore at their organization, because they were a small organization also. In the last 3 years, she's been the executive director of Friends of Residents and Long-Term Care. And she's been very attuned to policy issues. She's been a great partner with the Coalition on Aging the whole time she's worked in the fields there. She was a former vice chair of the coalition before we became 501c3. She headed up our public policy committee in the past. And hey, I'm just going to give it opportunity for you to say hello and to tell folks anything else you want them to know about you.
Okay. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Sandra. Hey, everyone. Happy Friday. Like Mary and Sandra mentioned, we'll start on May 4th, and I'm really excited to be starting in this capacity. I've always loved the mission of Coalition on Aging, and I'm excited to work with you all. I will probably be reaching out to you all just to get a feel for who all's at the table, what I can do as executive director. And I'm excited to work with Sandra and Mary as well. So we will see you all. I'll see you all again starting in May.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Kay. And Mary's she's gonna start stepping back some. So I have a lot of personal things like two grandchildren that are pretty young that I want to be spending more time with. So we'll have lots of transitions here. But I also want to publicly thank Sandra for all she's done for the coalition. I mean, she has just been a rock of Gibraltar and getting things done and bringing in fresh perspectives on things. When you do things the same way for a long time, you get kind of ingrained with it. But she offers fresh eyes and just a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and it's just a good person and a good soul to talk to and all. And unfortunately, Sandra's like all many of us. She's going through the caregiver journey right now with her mom. So we all sometimes live our jobs, and she's living her job right now. So, but Sandra, thank you so much, and we are just really excited about doubling our staff. And I think the combination of the two people we have on board are really going to be great advancements and really able to move that needle on aging issues in North Carolina. So thank you both for the roles you are playing and the roles you will be playing. So
Thank
thanks a
you.
lot. Yeah. So a couple of things. We're going to be talking about things regarding the legislature and all in the next segment of the program, but just knowing that the General Assembly is back in session. They came back in May 21st, and that's taken up a lot of time and effort of everybody right now. In that regard, we've done several just sessions with a lot of members of the coalition that want to be developing legislative agendas, primarily for the 2027 session. So we've been talking through with them about things that we think are important to consider when you think about establishing legislative agendas and how you get people on board, and pros and cons of strategies and things like that. So we're glad as a coalition to be able to do that type of thing. I want to call on right now Lee Dobson. Lee is chair of the Public Policy Committee for the coalition, and let her tell you kind of where we're standing right now with our advocacy and public policy for the current legislative session we're in, and then going forward in 2027. So Lee, good to see you. Lee is vice chair of the coalition also.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Mary. As Mary said, the Public Policy Committee met back in March, and we really accomplished a couple of things. One was we evaluated what's to come with the legislative session and determined that number one, we're not going to have an advocacy day as we have in the past, but we are going to host an educational event on May 12th for anyone who wants to come and learn about how things operate at the General Assembly and get better informed on some of the issues, how things work, and get better prepared for the long session in 2027. So that advocacy education event is May 12th. It's free, but you do need to register. And in the minutes, we'll provide the registration information. So please join us for this walking tour around the legislative building while learning all about the ins and outs of that. The other thing that the Public Policy Committee did was we looked at put a recommendation forward to the board on how policy decisions and recommendations are to be made within the Coalition on Aging. We wanted to have a structured way to evaluate requests for sign-on letters, for requests on taking up an issue on behalf of older adults. And so the recommendation was submitted to the board for them to review and consider, and it has been adopted. It just provides that framework for how things are done. And I think that gives us a good document to base decisions on, so they're not haphazard. And then the last thing that the committee did is we evaluated the priorities for 2026 and determined that many of the priorities that we had for 2025 remain in place. We've had a very difficult, the long session was a very difficult year, and so many of those remain. So we've essentially are carrying those same policy priorities forward for 2026. And the committee will be working on the policy priorities for 2027 for the long session. And I believe they have been updated and included on the website. I'll stop there and open up for any questions or further comments. Hearing none, I will. Mary, did you want me to provide a little context on what's happening at the General Assembly, or is that part of another?
We'll do that. Yeah, we'll do that
Okay.
when we get down into the next item on the agenda. Sandra, a couple things Lee mentioned. If you wouldn't mind making a note that when you send out the materials from the meeting today, add the 2026 legislative agenda and also the criteria we're approved for basically evaluating whether or not the coalition will support an issue. Yeah, and I think that's a big issue about what we support a lot of things. There's a difference in what we support and what we actually put in writing on a legislative agenda. We've got to be pretty focused on a limited number of items that we actually put on a legislative or policy agenda, which means that we kind of take the lead on things of that nature. But there's a lot of things that we support as a coalition that don't go on that agenda. So I know that many of you have issues that you ask for support for, and we typically get behind supporting things for our members.
I just wanted to mention too that the policy that was ultimately adopted by the board was actually created probably 2 or 3 years ago, and as we were looking at information, we kind of pulled that back out. And it really was a pretty good policy. And then the members of the committee were able to kind of put their thoughts on it, which ultimately, as Lee said, came to the board. So I think it is a good foundation for us moving forward to look at the advocacy issues.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to remember is, you know, the Coalition on Aging is made up of a lot of different membership, you know, members with differing views. And, you know, I think the policy provides the framework for how decisions are made. And it does involve feedback from membership. And, you know, and so whenever possible, we will give an opportunity for the coalition's members to weigh in on different issues. We recognize that some of the issues have to have a decision made very, very quickly. And so, you know, the long, you know, deliberation sometimes is not possible, but we do value the input and the insights from our membership, and I think that's what makes us strong is, you know, the differing views from our membership that all supports aging across North Carolina.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point, Lee, to bring up. And, you know, if we have issues that come up that we know that members just are at different ends of the spectrum on their opinions on it, I think our position usually is we try to provide information to members so they can make informed decisions on their own. You know, we don't take a position if our members don't agree, but we try to educate people and inform folks about what's going on. So thank you, Sandra. Also, um, Lee mentioned the May 12th kind of advocacy education day that will be at the General Assembly. The newsletter that went out yesterday has a registration in there also for that. So you can get registration that way too. The coalition is a new member of the new coalition is called Keep North Carolina Medicaid Strong Coalition. And they have been working on the issue of trying to get the money that's needed, enough money that's needed to keep Medicaid strong through the current fiscal year, but also looking at what's going to happen as we begin to look at implementing the provisions that impact Medicaid from HR 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill. So we expect to be very engaged in that. I know one thing that they're doing right now is collecting stories from individuals about the importance that Medicaid plays in people's lives, and their lives, or people they love or they work with lives. So if you have stories about that you'd like to share, let us know, and we will get you all the forms and things that you need to make sure your story is recorded. And that's in many cases that's putting the face on the issue that elected officials need to have, things like that. We're going to talk about this more later, but the House Select Committee on Property Tax Relief and Reform has come up with their report. And, you know, the issue of property tax relief for older adults has been one that we've been closely monitoring and advocating for more relief. And we'll talk about that when we go through the discussion about what's going on with the legislature. One of the other things that we've been engaged in is there is call it an Adult Protective Service design team that's looking at what changes are needed in the adult protective service legislation in North Carolina. And probably not a lot will be done in the short session, but hopefully going forward in 2027, we can look at some fairly comprehensive legislation regarding adult protective services in North Carolina. I think I've said a couple of times is that our law for adult protective services in North Carolina has not changed since the mid-1970s. We were the first state to have an adult protective service legislation, but haven't done much with the legislation since then. The Governor's Advisory Committee for Strategic North Carolina is having a listening session on May 28th at Asheville Buncombe Technical Community College in Asheville. They've had one session already in Tarboro. They'll be doing the one in Asheville on the 28th of May, and they'll be doing one later in the year in the Triad region, and one also kind of in the Charlotte area. So I encourage you to go if you can. This is a great opportunity to have your thoughts and suggestions for what needs to happen with aging and adult services and things to be heard and recorded. At the one in Tarboro, aging came up numerous times, and we were able to get that on the record that this is what people out in the communities are saying. But there's 5 big areas that the governor is asking for input from citizens on: is health and well-being, workforce and economic development, public safety, education, and constituent services. So, and I was surprised. I expected at the one that was held in Tarboro, we'd certainly get a lot of comments about health and well-being, particularly, things like older adults, healthcare needs, things like that. But there was a lot of comments that came out about public safety and concerns about older people being victims of frauds and scams, and just, fear of crime, things of that nature that came out. That was very prominent there. We've talked in the past and had presentations and heard from folks about the Rural Health Transformation Program. Y'all may have seen already that Maggie Woods has been named the director of that program. We had her on as one of our speakers at our August meeting back last year. At that point, she was the director of the North Carolina Department of Information Technology Office of Digital Equity. So she has moved from digital equity to health transformation. But I think you could tell by when she presented to us in August, just a real caring and compassionate person who really has a heart for doing public service. So really glad to hear she's in that position. Also, anybody who's got connections with Medicaid, particularly Medicaid long-term care services and supports, we know that Sabrina Lee, who was a longtime director of that program, retired in December. Greg Daniel has been named as the new director of long-term care services and supports at Medicaid. He comes from behavioral health and intellectual developmental disability background. And just one more update is Melanie Bush has been named the deputy secretary for Medicaid, taking Jay Lubnan's place, who left a couple of months ago. So she has a great background. She actually was a legislative staffer here in North Carolina at one point. But if anybody's ever talked with her or heard her present, she is really a crackerjack and on ball with things. There was a bill introduced in the General Assembly this week to increase the Medicaid dental rates. Right now, North Carolina pays about 34% of what it costs to provide dental care services through the Medicaid program. This bill is asking for $80 million, and it would increase the Medicaid reimbursement level to 50% of the commercial rate. So it's really hard to find dentists that will care for people with dental problems. We know that many older adults, as their teeth get older, they have problems, and that is a big issue if they're on Medicaid trying to get coverage. Right now, Medicaid dental services account for 14% of the services that are provided, but only get 2% of Medicaid reimbursement. So there's a kind of a disconnect there. So there's information about this in our newsletter that went out yesterday also. Just a resource I want to point out to you that might be helpful to you is the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center, which is a coalition member, has just produced economic county spotlights. They take all the economic data that's available across the state and put it together into snapshots for how every county fares in those areas. So if you're talking about wages, if you're talking about housing, if you're talking about economic development, that type of thing. So check that out. There's a link to that also in the newsletter. On the federal level, the president has released his budget for 2027, and we know that, just like the governor's budget here in North Carolina, the General Assembly has to develop a budget. Sometimes they take the governor's considerations into recommendations into consideration. Sometimes they don't. Same thing with Congress. Sometimes they'll take the president's recommendations into consideration. Sometimes they don't. So consistent with kind of what he did last year, he's proposing elimination of some programs that we think are very important, such as the low-income home energy assistance program, the community development block grant, and the Title V program, senior community services employment program. Most things are flat funded, but there are a few other things that have some little budget cuts, and some things that maybe have a little bit more, but for the most part, elimination of some of those programs he wants to get rid of could have very significant impact. And let's see, I I think that's all I had. Anybody got any questions about anything kind of going on? It's a busy time of the year with conferences and workshops and things like that. So we're going to some of those and speaking at some of them, things of that nature. So thank y'all for inviting us to be a part of them. I'm looking for hands, see if anybody's got a hand up. You don't see any. Okay. All righty. Moving on, that one of the most active and important committees that we have at the coalition is our Health Equity Committee. I want to call on Daryl and Rosalie, who are chairs of that committee, just to give us an update about things going on. They got some exciting things happening. So turn it over to you guys.
Thank you, Mary. And I'm going to turn
Mary.
it over to Rosalie.
Oh, thanks, Daryl.
You're welcome.
As many of y'all know, we kind of did the Health Equity Committee at the beginning of the year. And so we will be having our hot topic May the 8th. And Nancy Golding with the Alzheimer's Association is going to be presenting on building healthy brain habits during Older Americans Month. So that is kind of our update for today. Daryl, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yes. So please prepare to attend that first hot topic. And it should be very exciting information for us around dementia and so forth that Lindsay Golden is going to present to us. And as you know, we have started doing hot topics and then a speaker series. So we're going to be bouncing back and forth between the two to make sure that you have information that's pertinent for today's environment for us to continue to work in the health equity space. I want to announce, though, that we have two people on our committee that received quite significant accolades in the last month or so. One is Katie Kutcher from Central Line Agency on Aging, rather. She has been promoted to the Aging Director. And I believe her role started April 1st. So that's congratulations to Katie. And secondly, Mary Williams Stover, who's also on the Health Equity Committee, she received the American Society on Aging Award. Let's see, it's called the Justice and Equity Award at the conference that was just held this week. I believe, Sandra, you were there and you weren't there. And I know Katie.
No,
Katie was there.
Katie was there, Lee
Yes.
Little was there, and
Lee
Mary
Little.
Williams Stover. So the coalition was represented very well in Atlanta.
Great, great. So
And paid their own way. So that was good.
oh,
Yes.
okay. Make that clear, right? So, but part of the Justice and Equity Award was received due to the work with NCCOA and the Health Equity Committee. So congratulations to Mary as well. And then I want to announce that there is as last year, No Menthol Sunday will be held again this year on May 17th. So No Menthol Sunday, we have an initiative to curtail, really we want to stop people from smoking because it has a lot of adverse results for health and particularly in our aging population. But that's the hardest population to probably stop from smoking because they've been smoking probably for the majority of their lives. So just be aware that that is coming. So we'll have more information out of what Sandra's notice is on the May 8th hot topic, and it is a Zoom, and all the other scheduled activities for the Health Equity Committee. So I think that's it. Anybody have any questions or comments? Okay. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
guys. Appreciate
All
that.
right.
There was also the opportunity to sign up for that. There was information in the newsletter about that too, if you want to
Yeah.
use that to sign up. One last thing, this committee also is going to be developing a pretty robust website information on the coalition's website regarding health equity. So if you could run across resource materials or things that you think would be important that are shared with other people, let Daryl or Rosalie know so that they can as they develop this website out, that they can add that information in there. So appreciate that.
Thanks,
Okay.
Mary.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we're at the point on the agenda where we want to do sharing by coalition members. Tell us what you guys have going on that you would like people to know about. And if you got meetings or policy changes or new staffing or whatever that would be helpful for folks to know, we'd appreciate that. Or nobody has anything going on, right? Very dull time of the year. Okay, Misty, I see your hand up. There you
Hey,
are.
can everybody here see me? Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that my background was appropriate. So the Division of Aging has several events coming up, but one's coming up Monday, and I'll put the link in as soon as I'm done speaking. So it is how the Division of Aging handles fair housing and how they interact with fair housing. So it'll be a presentation by our Targeted Key program, and then it'll be coupled with the Office of Administrative Hearings, who actually handles fair housing discrimination complaints. So I'll put that in. It is a webinar, and it is this Monday, the 27th at 1 p.m. And I know that Mary Bethel and the Coalition of Aging has sent that out. So thank you all. There's also two other events that are coming, and that would be in May. So these are both events for Older Americans Month. They're both presented by Dr. Greenblatt or Larry Greenblatt. One will be about dementia and brain health, and then one will be about cannabis use and how to take and deal with pain management and what we do and don't know about cannabis use for pain management. I'll send those out as well, but just be aware that those links have not yet been activated just because they're going through the Secretary's office. But I'll send that out to Coalition on Aging so they can attend those as well. Thanks.
Misty, do you have the dates for the presentations by Dr. Greenblatt? Dr. Greenblatt is the state health director, and he has been on the coalition meetings and presented in the last couple of months. But if you have the dates so people can get them on the calendar, if not.
They are May the 8th at 10, and that's the one for dementia. And the one for cannabis use is May the 29th at 10 a.m. as well.
Okay. At 10 o'clock also?
Correct.
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys heard yesterday or not, but the federal government is loosening their restrictions on medical marijuana. And, a lot of states already, have loosened their restrictions. So it's going to be interesting. Medical marijuana has been an issue that the General Assembly has grappled with. You've got a very influential senator that is very much behind this, who had a cancer journey that, this was something that was important to him and helped him get through that journey. And he's really been advocating for it. But you've got other folks in the General Assembly who just really are very much against it. So it's going to be interesting to see. I don't think it's probably going to come up in this short session, but it'll be interesting to see if it comes up in a long legislative session, 2027. So, but it was interesting about the federal government's kind of announcement yesterday. Tara Muller with Disability Rights, see your hand up.
Thanks, Mary. Hi, everyone. So delighted to hear about the marijuana issue because I have to share here that my mother has dementia, and the use of medical marijuana for her has been absolutely amazing and so much better than any prescriptions her physicians have been prescribing. So even though it's not technically, the THC products are what we've been using, and it really is life changing. So glad to hear that. Just a quick post about our upcoming annual conference for Disability Rights North Carolina. For anybody who's not familiar, we're the state agency or the state organization that advocates for the advancement of disability rights, all types of disabilities, all ages. Our annual conference will be in a week and a half, May 6th, Wednesday, May 6th at the Friday Center in Chapel Hill. And we still have some openings, and we also still have some openings for tables if anyone is interested in sponsoring or tabling that event. I'll put the information in the chat. It's always a great time to connect to folks. And also, we have a lot of resources and a lot of, one-on-one guidance from both our staff and from a lot of our sponsors. So hope to see you all there. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. And if y'all aren't familiar with disability rights, check out their website. They have really been the impetus behind a lot of really good things that have happened in North Carolina to ensure that persons with disabilities are able to have the rights like everybody does. So check it out. Okay, let's see. Janice Tyler, I see your hand.
Hi, everybody. Just a reminder that the North Carolina Association on Aging, we're having our boot camp on May the 4th. It's all virtual. It's from 1 to 4. You can go to our website, ncaoa.org, to sign up. Hope you can come.
Okay.
Good to see everybody.
Good job with that.
Janice, do you also want to mention about the awards for the Association on Aging? They just put out some more information on the annual awards.
You might be more up to date. I know they put it out, but I'm like, have you got it handy?
We're both board members of that organization. Yes.
Yes.
I will put it in the calendar of events. It did not get into the coalition newsletter, but the Association on Aging normally presents awards at their annual conference. Since they did not have one this year, they are going to present them anyway. But the deadline now, I think it's been extended to May 29th to submit any information on the awards. So I will make sure that I get that out in the calendar of events as well.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you.
Let's see. Other hands? Anybody got anything else going on?
This is Katie with the Central Carolina Area Agency on Aging. Just a couple things.
Yes, ma'am. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. So while we're sharing, I just want to mention we have a monthly webinar series. And so we do have a webinar coming up here in May related to ageism awareness. And then we're scheduled out through, I believe, through August also. So I'll drop those in the chat box. They're free to attend. We also record the webinar, so there's an archive of past webinars that people can view. A great training opportunity. And then just wanted to mention we are busy planning our annual conference. So it's upcoming this October, and we have just secured Tifa Snow will be our keynote speaker. So we're really excited about that. We're still accepting proposals for breakout sessions. So I'll pop that information in the chat box as well. Thank you.
And what's the date, Katie, of your conference?
October 16th, and it will be at the Harris Conference Center in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay. I'll just give a plug for your webinars that you do every month. I mean, they have really good speakers on these, and they're very well attended by folks. You get people outside your region, don't you, Katie? That there really has a broad following. So I encourage you to take advantage of those.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? All right, just encourage y'all. Sandra, I guess the calendar for May is going to go out probably. Well, it's still April, so I guess you'll send it out end of next week or so. What's your plan?
Yes, the plan is to send it out on May the 1st. So if you've got anything that you would like, just let me know. Send it to me. You can send it to the executive director email, and we will by Thursday of next week, which is the 30th, and I will get it out.
All righty, very good. All right, last chance. Anybody got anything? You want to tell your vacation plans or anything like that?
You should be telling everybody your vacation plans.
Yeah, so I'm leaving tomorrow to go to Spain and Portugal, so I'm excited about it. So looking forward to it. My daughter and I are going to go together. We're very much alike, so I hope we are still speaking when we get back. Don't tell
That's
her that.
having known Mary for just the last few months, the last about year and a few months, and a lot of you have known her for a lot longer. I think it's great that she is taking this time to get away. And Kay and I were talking. It wouldn't surprise me if either of us got a text or an email forwarded from her while she's gone, but we're hoping not. So she can enjoy herself.
Well, be prepared. I have unlimited data and talk and text. So
Uh-oh, we might be in trouble, Kay.
y'all might be hearing from me, yeah. So anyway, so moving on. So we're coming to the part of the agenda where we're going to talk about what's going on in this legislative short session, probably some things that led up to this legislative short session, and just things that we think will be on the radar and some background on it. So I'm gonna turn it over to Chris Brandenburg to kind of get things started on this. But we've got lots of y'all who also are very attuned to what's going on with the legislative process. So this is going to be kind of a give and take with everybody kind of chiming in. But Chris, we're gonna let you lead it off. So tell us good news.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, thanks for having me, Mary. And yeah, your trip sounds wonderful. I'm just a little bit jealous. I'm happy to kind of start by, I guess, setting the stage a little bit for the short session and a bit about how we got here. It's important to note that historically, the short legislative session, the whole goal of it was to tweak the state budget. For those of you that have been following along, you know that we did not get one of those last year. You probably seen that our long session in 2025 was not very productive, but let's talk for a minute about just how not productive that it actually was, because I think it helps set the stage for this short session. So, first of all, the most basic job of the state legislator is to get a state budget, and they did fail at that job last year. But it was also really unproductive when it came to passing bills. So the state General Assembly only passed 97 bills last year, which made last long session the least productive long session in the modern era of our state's history. So there was not a lot that got done. So if you had priority issues like I did, like Mary did, like many of us did, and you felt like you didn't get a lot of traction last year, or you were busy maybe playing defense on certain issues, there's a big reason why, because there was not a lot of productivity in the session last year. Contrary to what you might think it being about, with maybe just both parties not being able to get along and come to consensus, the issue primarily stemmed from leadership in the state house and state senate not being able to reach agreement. And leadership in both of those chambers, Republicans control both those chambers. So ultimately, Senate leadership and House leadership had a real struggle in reaching a consensus on the budget. And the primary sticking point that caused all these issues has to do with our taxes in North Carolina. So the Senate wanted to, and from everything I know right now, still wants to essentially stick with some trigger laws that we have in place that create this sort of downward, or sort of this decrease when it comes to our state income taxes. House leadership has taken a look at some projected future budget forecasts for our state and said, hang on, I think we need to pump the brakes on some of this, and maybe reevaluate some of the changes to continuing to cut our state income tax. Because as all of y'all know, when it comes to funding government and paying for things, that's what you have to have in order to get it done. So as the state continues to have to spend, and potentially the state is not immune to, the inflation and the increasing cost of things we've seen, and of course the growing population in general that North Carolina has, spending has to increase. And if you're going to continue to cut taxes, that means that your base to be able to do that spending may be decreasing. So that's been the real sticking point, the real problem between the two chambers in being able to reach this agreement on the state budget. There's been some other pieces in the past as well, including the funding of a children's hospital, but the primary issue that still needs to be rectified today has to do with this tax situation. Now, I will say the short session did start this past week on the 21st, and we are hearing so far positive developments from both chambers as far as getting closer to reaching an agreement. I'm cautiously optimistic that an agreement on the state budget is going to be reached, I hope, sooner rather than later. For those that don't know, we don't operate the way the federal government does. So if we don't reach a state budget, we simply go back to the previous year's budget, and all of the reoccurring funding continues to be in place. Non-reoccurring funding, special items that were put in the budget, do not continue to be put in place, and there is quite a bit of that. We may get into that a bit later, but that has certainly caused some problems. And of course, folks like state employees and teachers and many others that may be counting on a bit of a compensation increase, that has not happened due to not being able to get this budget situation rectified. So that's the big point I want to sort of bring, setting the stage from last year's session, was there was not a ton that got done considering how long they were in session for, and there was a lot of gridlock, but that gridlock was not between the Democratic governor and the Republican controlled state legislature. It was primarily between leadership within the House and the Senate. So I'll pause there for just a second before I sort of get into the short session and all the different pieces of what we're expecting in this short session, a bit of the changes coming with the political climate, in case there's any questions or any comments from kind of the setting stage portion here.
I would just add also, sometimes though, we're glad that a bill doesn't pass. So, so even though they had only passed 97, there were a few in there that we were glad didn't cross over the finish line there too. So those of you that also work at legislature or have lobbyists in your organizations or whatever, do y'all have anything to add to what Chris has said, kind of setting the stage here? Okay, Chris, I don't hear anybody, so proceed on.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit, and we'll go into some of the expectations for the short session, which I mentioned just began. But before we get to that point, I want to talk a little bit about some of the coming political changes that we're going to expect with the with this session and with the legislature here in the future. We really saw both parties during we had one of the earliest primaries in the country this year in North Carolina in March, and we saw some big shakeups on both sides. I think one got more attention, but it's important to note on the Democratic side, I would argue three of perhaps the most moderate Democrats in the House, folks that had in the past on certain bills, not necessarily often, but on certain bills, had voted with Republicans on some things, all lost their primary elections in March. So that's something to really pay close attention to and watch as we start this short session. Are these individuals now going to be even more likely to potentially vote with Republicans on certain issues? How are they going to be, what role are they going to play now going forward, sort of being in that lame duck role where they only have a few months left to go serving in that capacity, knowing that they won't be back in January. That's going to be an interesting piece to watch, and that could play a major role in veto overrides, which I'll talk about here in a minute. On the Republican side, if you've been paying any attention at all, you know that there was more like an earthquake that we saw in the primary here in March. The senator who'd been leading the North Carolina State Senate since Republicans took over in 2011, Senator Phil Berger, Senate Pro Tem. I would argue perhaps the most powerful elected official in the entire state, lost his primary by about 23 votes to the sheriff of his home county in Rockingham County. This was actually a big enough news story that even the New York Times ran a piece on this big primary upset. So this was a huge deal. Senator Berger has run the North Carolina State Senate for 15 years, as I mentioned. We're going to now see a shakeup in the state Senate. There's been a few folks who have already publicly come forward and kind of put their names out there that they're interested in serving in that role, going forward in 2027, including Senator Michael Lee, Senator Ralph Heiss, and Senator Todd Johnson. So we'll be watching that closely. But it's worth acknowledging that there's a chance for a real shakeup here. We have no idea, whoever sort of takes leadership going into next year, how similar they're going to run the Senate compared to the way Senator Berger has for the last 15 years. So this was a really big deal. And may have some big implications on our work. One of the things that Senator Berger was just never super supportive of were things like study bills and study commissions, additional sort of committees. So there may be some room there. Mary and I have talked about the potential to maybe have some wiggle room on some things we've been working on, like for a number of years, trying to get a Committee on Aging back reestablished within the North Carolina State Legislature. So just some things to sort of keep an eye on and are worth watching. And they continue to be worth watching going into this short session. So how Senator Burr is going to choose to sort of use his last couple months with the General Assembly in session is going to be very interesting to watch as well. One of the nice things I will say about our fairly new House Speaker, Destin Hall, is he puts out a legislative calendar that he projects how long this session is going to go. He put that out last week. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to live and die by that calendar, but from what he put out, it shows that the short session, at least in the House, is supposed to run until July the 2nd. I can tell you that legislators are going to be very anxious to get back to their districts since this is an election year. They're going to be wanting to spend a lot of time back home campaigning and perhaps even more so fundraising. So be expecting if you have a meeting with a legislator, you've been trying to get one of your legislators perhaps back in their district. Once they go home midsummer and going into the fall, that's a great time to try to secure either a meeting with them in the district or attending a campaign event or something like that, because they're for those few months, they're going to be very willing to give access to their constituency because they know they're going to be on the ballot again this fall. As far as the legislative issues and kind of looking at this short session,
can I
go ahead,
interrupt you
Megan.
just 1 minute?
Of course. Yep.
I'm sorry. Let me just interrupt 1 minute. So one thing I will say, though, is that it is important to contact legislators back home. That's, and have them come to your programs, have them talk with folks that are program recipients, things like that. But we are in election season. So just about every legislative district is competitive this time. Means you've got at least a Republican and Democrat candidate running. So you got to be conscious also about being nonpartisan in what you do. I mean, there is a little bit of leeway about talking with an incumbent that you're trying to help educate about your programs, but you also need to think about, because we are going to have elections in November, inviting the folks from the other party to also, parties in some cases, to also come.
Yeah. No, well said. And well said. And we certainly abide by that, obviously, with the ARP as well. We're very, very strategic about how we do it. It is very important. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the expectations for this session, and legislatively, policy-wise, what we may be looking for. As I mentioned, it's going to go pretty quick. The number one priority, right, has got to be getting a state budget. We were the only state in the country last year that did not adopt a state budget, so not a real great look for us. I think some folks over there maybe are, at least I'm hoping, are a bit embarrassed by that and want to get that rectified. I'm cautiously optimistic that we will have a state budget done. I couldn't tell you exactly when, but I'm hoping it's earlier rather than later. But that's going to be the top priority, and I think everything else is sort of going to then fall underneath that. Some good news that's already come from this first week, or at least semi-good news. There are still some details being sorted out in this. Has to do with the Medicaid rebase funding, which there was about 300 million, a little over 300 million in Medicaid rebase funding that the General Assembly, the House and the Senate came to an agreement on and introduced, and I believe we'll be taking final votes on to send to the governor next week. So that was a big sticking point. I know many of y'all on that call probably know that issue even better than I do, but that was has been a big issue, the funding there for the last several months. We're hopeful that that's going to be fully rectified here within the next week or two, and then that the governor will be able to sign that into law. There are some oversight pieces within that bill that I know some folks are still reviewing, including the governor's office, and wanting to kind of get some extra clarification and information on. So we'll see how that all plays out. But that's definitely a large piece, and I wasn't real surprised to see, the first couple of days them go ahead and make a move on that, given the need there. So I'm going to kind of just quickly go through some other pieces here, and then I'll pause. And if there's specific questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. But some other things that we expect that may come up during this short session. One, there's been a lot nationally in the news that we've seen about energy consumption and around data centers. And some of y'all on this call have probably even seen your own municipalities. There's been a number across North Carolina that have actually banned data centers being built. Who's going to pay for that energy consumption? I wouldn't be surprised if there's some legislation that comes up around that during this session to address that. It's become a real emerging topic across the country. Another big thing that Mary already alluded to is property taxes. So that's been a big issue now and gotten a lot of attention for the last I'd say year. A lot of folks across the state have seen their property tax bills rise and have communicated their displeasure with that with their state representatives. The House set up a property tax reform committee. Mary and I actually had I don't know if pleasure is the right word, of attending a number of those committee meetings over the last several months. The last one that they held, the final one, was on the 15th of this month, and they did vote out a couple of recommendations. Mary and I had a lot of hope going into these meetings that they were going to, look to address this in a pragmatic way with some bipartisan solutions. The biggest recommendation that got pushed out is a potential constitutional amendment that would create a levy limit on property taxes. I will tell you that all these meetings were heavily attended by municipal government county commissioners. As you can imagine, they are not real excited about the prospect of having a levy put on property taxes, because that's how a vast majority of municipal government, local government functions and is dependent upon. So the idea that the state is going to step in and decide, what their funding is going to be able to be, is not something that really excites them. In order for something like this to be on the ballot in November, the state constitution requires that 3/5 of each chamber vote in favor for a constitution amendment to go to the voters. So in the North Carolina State Senate, Republicans have what's called a supermajority, so they do control, they have 3/5 the vote. Now, whether that will be dependent upon every single one of them showing up and then voting in favor of this initiative, whether or not that will happen, I do not know for sure. In the state house, Republicans are one shy of this supermajority. So there would have to be at least one member from the Democratic Party that voted with Republicans in order for a 3/5 threshold to be reached. As I mentioned, there were 3 Democrats that lost their primary that I think are certainly worth watching when it comes to something like this. But whether or not this will actually get through both chambers is yet to be seen. In some of the meetings Mary and I sat in on this issue, we did hear some concern expressed by even some Republican legislators about this who served as former county commissioners. So we're watching this issue really closely. We'll be fascinated to see if it actually makes it onto the ballot in November. As I mentioned, there's a number of folks within county government that do have a lot of concerns about it. At the same time, we have an understanding of why folks who've been hit really hard with property tax increases want to see some changes. We're especially concerned, I certainly speak for AARP, we're especially concerned about folks who have been trying to age in place and been in their home for decades. In some cases have their homes paid off and then have an increase in property taxes and are no longer able then to afford to stay in their home. So it is a very concerning matter, but it's also one that that the right balance has to be struck, and we'll see ultimately how that plays out with this potential levy limit constitutional amendment being proposed. But it's has the potential to suck a lot of air out of the room during this short session, and we'll be watching that issue very closely. So, may I have any questions about this specific one? I know it's a little bit complex.
Chris, I'll just add that yeah, this is a tough issue. And Chris and I, as he said, we're real optimistic going in that this might be the opportunity to expand either, and maybe both, either the homestead property tax exemption or the circuit breaker exemption that help a lot of low income older adults and persons with disabilities if they qualify with reducing their property taxes. Unfortunately, probably all of 30 seconds out of all those meetings was maybe spent on even bringing those issues up. However, I do think that there was over 20 bills introduced last legislative session regarding property tax relief, most of them dealing with older adults and persons with disabilities. So I think there's some groundswell of support for doing something. So in the closing comments for the one of the chairs of the property tax committee, when she was making her comments, she did say that we probably need, as a committee, which in this committee has been extended till December, we probably need to go back and look and see if we need to look at the exemptions for older adults and persons with disabilities. Now, what seems to be the preference for what they want to do is to increase or to make some changes to the circuit breaker program. Right now, the circuit breaker program is not used a whole lot because a lien is placed on a person's property. And if the property is sold or the person dies or whatever, anyway, lots of times families their kids end up with a lien on the property. And people just don't want that. So I think there is some support for doing away with that lien provision, which is something that we are going to be watching real carefully. We'll continue to go to these meetings, things of that nature, and push for that. I think this committee is going to be looking at other things that can be done to address relief for counties when it comes to the amount of money they're losing because of exemptions. Another bill they're putting forward this time has to do with for apartments that are run by for-profit groups that end up getting nonprofit groups to kind of be a partner with them, and that might be like a financial partner of 1%, but it allows them to qualify for a tax exemption. So there's a bill put forward to really rein that in. There were also 2 bills that were proposed to rein in the exemptions that public and nonprofit hospitals receive. And evidently the Hospital Association had a really, really active advocacy campaign against this. And those 2 bills were pulled and were not voted on by the committee. So, but I think we're going to see more and more things that they're going to be looking at that are currently exemptions that to property taxes that they're going to start reining in more. I'm sorry, Chris, didn't mean to derail that.
Very good. Very good. Good context there. Thank you. So a couple other just pieces short session wise. I've mentioned the supermajority and almost supermajority in the House chamber. Another item that I wouldn't be surprised to see over the coming weeks is there were a number of bills that Governor Stein vetoed during the last year's long session. Don't be surprised to see the General Assembly choose to take up somewhat veto overrides. Again, that requires that same 3/5 supermajority in order for a veto to be successfully overridden in each chamber and then become law. Whether or not Republicans will have the votes to be able to do that in the House is again to be determined, but it'll be something that we're watching very closely. There's a number of various issues up for potential veto override over the next couple months. So just something else to keep an eye on. I think you're going to continue to see support, conversations, and some additional funding for Hurricane Helene recovery and relief out in the western part of the state. So certainly be expecting to see that topic continue to get some attention as it should. I think, and Mary, feel free to speak to this as well, but I think there's also some potential to address involuntary commitment reforms during this short
Yeah.
session.
Yeah. Yeah, there is.
So
There's been a study commission that's been looking at that. I think a lot of this was brought on because we had a couple of unfortunately, very high profile murders by persons who had mental health challenges, and they had been involved in the mental health system and involuntary commitment in the past. And I think there's just a lot of a bottleneck and a lot of issues that have to be considered when you think about involuntary commitment. So I think this group's coming out with a fairly comprehensive package of proposed legislation, some of which we as a coalition would probably support and some of which we probably would not. So we'll see what happens on that.
yeah, I think one of the key things to remember with the short session is the initial purpose is for it to be tweaking of the budget, which obviously isn't going to happen this go around, but it's not typically a time where you're going to see a ton of new legislation introduced and pushed through, especially anything that has a tendency to be controversial. So I would expect this session to be dominated primarily by budget, taxes, and then I think the other sort of big thing to watch is going to be sort of this political transitioning, which you're going to see, especially in the Senate side with the leadership shift there. But there's a number of bills that were introduced last year that are no longer even eligible in the short session. Just so folks know, if a bill passed one of the two chambers, it made crossover, then it would still be eligible to be voted on. And then any bill that has what's called a fiscal note, so if there's a funding mechanism within that bill, it would also still be eligible to be voted on during this short session. But don't expect quite as robust and full of a agenda and seeing, this big blitz of all these new bills introduced as what you see during the long sessions during the following year. So just that's kind of the expectation for this session. Like I mentioned, July 2nd is when I'm hoping it's going to wrap up because I want to take a vacation in July. But that's sort of the thoughts on where we are right now and going into this session. I'm happy to talk in a minute about looking even further down the road and what we expect for 2027, but I want to pause for a minute. Any questions or comments or anything about where we are right now with a short session?
Chris, this is for either you or Mary. I saw something just the other day, kind of like the schedule for when bills can be introduced in this short session. Has that already passed, or seems like I saw an April 15th and an April 30th date? Am I getting that right, wrong?
I think the first date was when they had to be to bill drafting, and the second date was filing. Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I hadn't seen the dates for short session. I would imagine it's a much smaller window. I mean, what often happens in the short session, at least since I've been working it over the last several years, has been new legislation or new ideas are typically just attached to older to bills that were previously eligible, and then those bills are either reworked, rewritten, the old language is stripped out, the new language is put in, or they're attached to something broader. So maybe if there's a broad regulatory bill that's going to go through and there's something related to regulation that's a newer, bill or newer sort of policy, that could sort of hitch a ride with that is what you typically see during short session.
Yeah. Yeah. I know there's like one legislator has already introduced like 15 bills already. So I think legislators lots of times in the short session, even though knowing what the protocol generally is that you can't bring up new issues, they will introduce something just to get it on the radar out there. And lots of times, legislators promise constituents they'll do things, but there's a difference in introducing a bill and being a champion for it and really working for it. But I do think a lot of times they just introduce things knowing it's not going to go anywhere, so they can get it on the radar screen and maybe set the stage for the long session coming up.
Yeah, so I
that.
just pulled it up just because I wanted to. You made me curious. So it's the 29th. So it's a very, very short window, an 8-day window basically from session starting to when new bills can be introduced, and that's obviously done on purpose. So
I think one things that we typically, as Chris has said, you only certain things can be considered in the short session: budget bills, local bills, things that have come through a study commission, things, veto bills, that type of thing. But truth be known is that if the right person and they have the power, wants something done, they can get it done. And by many different ways of doing that. I've seen legislation that it wasn't on anybody's radar screen. All of a sudden, you'll go to a committee meeting thinking that this little bill that doesn't have a Chinaman's chance in passing is why is it on the agenda? And you get in there, and what's happened? They have gutted the content of that bill and put in a whole new bill, but they kept the original number for the bill. So it wasn't like they were bringing up a new bill. The bill number was already there. They just changed the total content for it. So anything can be done, at any time by the right person that wants to get something done. And, and a lot of times you see this done in the waning days of session when there's not time for debate or discussion, and they'll introduce things as like, they'll introduce bills that don't have any discussion. So it's either up or down vote on it. So it's a very, sausage is not pretty sometimes when it's made, and there are all sorts of shenanigans that go on. So you can't ever let your guard down about things. One thing back on the property tax thing, I know I keep bringing this up, but it is such a critical issue, I think, in North Carolina. I know a lot of local agencies get monies from counties and from municipalities. And if this constitutional amendment goes on the ballot in November, it will pass. It will pass. Most citizens, if they see the fact I can do something about what I think is uncontrolled property tax increases, I'm going to vote for it. But they may not realize the implications that something like this could have. So it's going to be a very interesting process, as Chris said, to see if this passes. And I do think this has potential of causing not only division within the Republican Democratic Party, but I think within the parties themselves, because you have people with different views on this. So it will be a very, very interesting process. What questions do you have about things that Chris has mentioned already about things that might come up this session? I would say we have played a lot of defense, trying to keep things from happening in many cases. We want to get to the position that we can start playing offense and start pushing for things. And I can't remember if I said this at the meeting I was at before, but there is a lot of bent up demand right now for things. Since there hasn't been a budget for a while, you've got all these things that haven't had funding increases. You actually have some cases where agencies have lost funding. For instance, because we did not have a new budget approved, and Lee, I don't know if you mentioned this. You may have mentioned this. If you did, like I said, I'm getting my meetings mixed up. But if an agency received non-recurring funding and you don't have a new budget, that non-recurring funding is not continued. a lot of times, particularly with funding for nonprofits, the General Assembly will put money in each year for them on a non-recurring basis, but it's always approved. To give you an example, North Carolina Senior Games has had funding from the General Assembly for decades, but it's always been non-recurring each year. Well, they got the money in 2025, but because of we don't have a budget for 2026, and then they got non-recurring money, they did not get their money for 2026, which represents 40% of their budget. So, it's a tough time for a lot of these agencies that had been getting money, but now they aren't getting it. And you're beginning to see agencies now that we're getting to the end of the state fiscal year are really beginning to have to make some tough decisions about what they're going to do if they don't get money approved when we're in the short session here. So questions from y'all about what Chris has said so far, or anything you guys want to add that also, helping to work in the General Assembly a lot?
I just want to this is Lee Dobson with Hearts for Home Care. I just want to echo what Chris is saying. And I think really the important thing is for us all to work together to advocate for older adults and the needs that they require. I know there's a lot of different things in play, but I think the most important is just making sure that lawmakers are hearing what the impact will be on not only your services and programs that support older adults. So we need to be sharing our stories. We need to get lawmakers to see the impact of the decisions that they're making on our communities.
Yep. Well said. Thank you, Lee.
Sure.
Okay, Chris. Bring it. Tara, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. One quick, I think that was a really excellent summary and I really appreciate it. I wanted to add one thing about you mentioned the involuntary commitment study oversight committee and the possibility of a bill coming up. I just wanted to remind everybody, in case it's not on your radar, that the Arenas law, which is the one that drastically changed involuntary commitment laws last year following the horrible stabbing, was delayed because, part of it was delayed. The part that was delayed is the part that would allow for folks like magistrates, police officers, et cetera, to refer people to involuntary commitment if they think, just looking at them, that they may pose a danger to self or others. And we know that the system is already really, really overloaded and backed up, and there aren't enough staff and hospitals to handle this. There aren't enough staff in jails to handle this. We've got not enough beds for people who are facing IVC. That provision does not even require mental illness. It just requires, like I said, a law enforcement officer to say this person appears to be a danger to self or others and they need to be committed. We're very concerned that December, so it was pushed off till December 1. We're trying to get another extension of that because we don't think our systems are ready for that kind of additional influx of people. I think it will affect older adults, a lot of whom a lot of folks that we see in the system have just dementia or other things that may present as possibly violent behavior, but really do not pose a danger to self or others. So I just wanted to put that on your radar. We've been working hard to get an extension of that December 1 deadline. Of course, it would have to be done this short session if that's done. So thank you for raising that issue. I just wanted to let you know about that one particular provision we're very concerned about. Thanks.
And what was that date again? The date for the extension?
December 1 is when it goes
December
it will go into effect. Yes.
Right. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, I don't see any other hands. So Chris, why don't you bring us home on this?
Yeah, so just kind of wanted to look ahead to 2027. I think a couple of really important things to note. One, we talked about the early March primaries that we had here in North Carolina, and some of the kind of shocks that came really on both sides of the aisle with those primaries. It's also important to note that we've seen a really high, slightly higher number than usual of folks announcing that they're retiring or running for a different office or having resigned to take, another job. Over the course of the last several months. So I expect a elevated rate of turnover with our state legislator going into 2027. I'm talking up to, potentially about a third of our General Assembly being new going into 2027. So I think everybody, should just be aware of that. That presents, I think, unique opportunities as well as unique challenges. But it definitely gives folks, especially if you're a constituent, real opportunity early on to educate them on specific issues that they simply may not have a good, firm base of knowledge in. The other massive piece, which I've spent time talking about already, is who is going to get that leadership, who's going to become the new leader in the North Carolina Senate, and how are they going to choose to operate? Will there be some of us on this call that perhaps already have a relationship built in with that individual, so we'll have access. Some of those folks that are vying for that role, I've got a decent working relationship with. Others, not so much. So very curious to see how that plays out. And I think lastly, going into 2027, and Mary's talked about this some already, but we spent a lot of the long session in 2025 on the defense. I mentioned it wasn't a very productive session. There was not a lot that got done. There was not a lot of our priorities. Unfortunately, they were able to get a ton of traction on. We're hoping that 2027 we can play more offense, that the appetite, the climate will have changed a little bit, and that we're going to be spending less time defending current programs and trying to keep current levels of funding on things, and more time pushing forward and advancing some major priority issues. So that's a much larger goal for us going into the long session in 2027. We'll obviously also be watching closely to see, the supermajority that the Republicans have in the Senate stay intact. Does the potential supermajority or functional supermajority in the House stay intact? It's hard to say. I will tell you there's a number of competitive races in the General Assembly in November, and all 170 members of the legislature are up for re-election in November. So I'll be watching closely, but those are going to have a huge determination on how things are going to look going into the long session in January of next year. So with that, Mary, I'll pitch it back over to you.
Okay. Any final questions for Chris, or anybody want to add any other comments?
I don't want to take up Jill's time, but just a question, or just maybe if you could do a couple of comments, either Mary or Chris, on federal legislation or that potential changes with this being a major election year.
Gonna be an interesting election. That's for sure for Senate. Chris, you want to say? I mean, you were in Washington last week. You want to go?
Sure. Yeah, I spent last week in Washington and met with 11 of the 16 members of North Carolina's congressional delegation. So it was a pretty busy week. I think one of the big pieces that even this year we're going to see, I know we didn't spend a lot of time talking about it this morning, but is the impact of HR 1, Big Beautiful Bill, and a lot of the federal, a lot of the changes that are going to be trickling down to the state there. I know that Jill's going to, spend some time speaking to one of those today, but that's going to be a big piece. As far as what to anticipate, I don't have a crystal ball. There's still going to be potential for more redistricting across the country to be done. But if elections were held today, I think things look much better for the party that's out of power. And historically, the party that controls the White House typically has a tough time during the midterms, and that's been the case quite often over the last couple of decades, especially. So, my anticipation, my expectation would be that November would probably be better for the Democrats, just given that history. But we're still months away from November. Who knows what the real topic of critical issues will be that voters are talking about come November. A lot can change quickly, but that's sort of where I feel right now. And as Mary said, we got an open U.S. Senate seat with a very slim majority in the U.S. Senate. So there's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars. There's already, tens of millions being spent here in that race. Just expect more. So if you hate political ads, once we get into the summer, you're just not going to want to have the TV on or the radio or be on social media. It's going to be blitz, and it's going to come from everywhere. So very, very critical U.S. Senate seat, and we're kind of ground zero for that here in North Carolina.
And I think you'll see a lot of things taking place particularly in the Senate race, to drag folks to the water, on things just on both sides. So it's gonna be nasty. I mean, for lack of a better word, I think, for sure. All right, thank you, Chris, so much. You always have great political insight, and certainly appreciate you leading this discussion. So fingers crossed that some good things will come out in the short session, and that we can be more offensive. Maybe did I say offensive? Offensive in the 2027 session. All right, we're right on time. Well, Jill Simmerman Lawrence, glad to have you. Jill, I think, is no stranger to most of you on here. She served as deputy director of the Division of Aging for a while, and now she is chief of staff and senior advisor for the Opportunity and Wellbeing branch or a section, or it's bigger than a division. It's kind of over all the Opportunity and Wellbeing programs at DHHS for North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And she has been given the responsibility for kind of taking the lead on things related to food stamps and the One Big Beautiful Bill implementation in North Carolina. And she's going to give us an update on kind of where things stand and just talk about what we can expect coming down the pike here. So Jill, thank you so much. I know you've had a really busy morning. This is probably at your fourth meeting, I think. So we're glad you're here.
It might be my fourth meeting, but who's counting?
Right.
Get to share the proper screen. And then I'm going to pull y'all back up so I can see reactions and those kind of things. So just 1 second while I get set. Just want to make sure y'all can see my screen and hear me okay. I got a thumbs up from someone. Thank you. Okay. I am Jill Simmerman Lawrence. Mary, thank you so much for introducing me. My role is to be the Chief of Staff for Opportunity and Wellbeing, which is a portfolio that runs from birth through early childhood all the way into the older adult years, and also includes a disability portfolio at DHHS. We are kind of over all the social services and kind of human services, in a different DHHS might call it a human services portfolio. About 2 months into my role as Chief of Staff, I got volunteered, requested, told, making sure that I'm speaking clearly enough for our interpreter as well, that I would be leading HR1 SNAP implementation. And HR1 for us is the One Big Beautiful Bill, and North Carolina government, we generally call it HR1. This work at the state level crosses 5 different divisions. And so we needed a centralized management structure to make sure that the right hand and the left hand knew what was happening. Ensuring the SNAP program is one of Governor Stein's priorities, and it is one of our key driving forces at the department, particularly in light of this HR1 legislation. So this quickly goes over some kind of combination between what HR 1 has done for SNAP and to Medicaid, and how those changes are going to be implemented over time. In the top half of the graph, you see kind of big events that are happening at North Carolina DHHS as we're implementing HR 1. All SNAP eligibility changes became live in our eligibility system, which is known as NC FAST in North Carolina, effective February 1st of this past year. And then the Medicaid that you see coming, being detailed here is the first potential termination for non-compliance with HR 1 begins in April 1st, 2027. And then the initial non-citizen member outreach is going to happen on June 2026. And folks may start losing coverage in October of 2026. On the SNAP side, the work requirement changes, which we'll talk about, all of the eligibility changes were supposed to be effective on July 4th, 2025. And then the big kind of funding changes look at the federal government reducing administrative reimbursements for SNAP to 25%, where it was previously 50%. That goes into effect October of this year. And then the states are being required to cover up to 15% of SNAP benefit cost. And that will go into effect October 2027. So kind of what are the impacts on the big summary level? At the beneficiary level, at the people of North Carolina level, we're talking about increased food insecurity. For folks that can no longer maintain their status on FNS because they are no longer eligible, whether because they are a non-citizen that's no longer eligible, or they are not able to maintain their work requirements, or to prove their work requirements, there will be increased food insecurity for these folks and their families. At the state budget impact, we're looking at a lot of costs that are being shifted from the federal government to the state or local governments. In North Carolina, we are what is known as a state supervised, a county administered state, which means that the services that we provide, like actually determining eligibility, the state is not doing that one-on-one interaction. That happens at a county DSS level. Additionally, our counties cover the administrative cost that they incur to pay their staff. So this shift in administrative burden will hit the state at $16 million and the counties at $69 million annually. Additionally, the shift of the benefit cost share, this is the first time the benefit cost will be covered, not by the federal government through this program, and that could cost us a potential of $420 million every single year. And that is an estimation of the cost. It really depends on how many people are on the program on any given year. At the county impact level, when we think about our DSS workers, we're thinking about longer case and processing time and higher payment error rates, which also feeds into our annual benefit cost amount. And this is happening concurrently with Medicaid expansion or Medicaid changes. And so our county workforce that does eligibility determination and all of this work is really, really stretched thin. At the General Assembly level, they have some big decisions to make about our budget, and then they would also expect increased outreach from constituents. So really, what is happening? SNAP impacts 1.4 million North Carolinians rely on SNAP. That's kind of like on any given day, about 1.4 million people are on our program. In federal fiscal year 2024, we served over 2 million people and brought in $2.9 billion in annual federal funds. In what does that benefit cost? And so this is $2.9 billion that went into our economy to feed families. The summary of kind of the changes of HR 1 SNAP eligibility, it happened in two buckets. One bucket was eligibility changes, and the second bucket is changes to funding. The eligibility changes happened in the groups of called work requirements, standard utility allowance, and non-citizen eligibility. I'm actually going to go bottom to top to talk about these today. The non-citizen eligibility limited SNAP eligibility to individuals who reside in the United States and are U.S. citizens or U.S. nationals, lawful permanent residents with exceptions, aliens who are Cuban or Haitian entrants, or individuals who are lawfully residing in the United States according to things like, according to the COFA, according to COFA. Who got left out? Think about asylees, refugees, etc. These folks are going to be removed from our program at their next recertification. We anticipate that this is going to be about 12,500 people that were previously on our program will no longer be able to continue. And this change went into effect for North Carolina beginning February 1st. So over the next 6 months, folks will be falling off our program due to non-citizen eligibility. Next is the standard utility allowance. This decoupled a program called LIHEAP and kind of an automatic qualification for a utility allowance, like just a lump sum, instead of someone needing to provide documentation to explain or to document the amount of utilities that they have. If someone is elderly or has a disabled member in their household, they will still receive the standard utility allowance, but other folks will not. And then the third major change was an expansion of work requirements. SNAP, unlike Medicaid, has always had work requirements, and North Carolina statute requires that you can get a waiver, used to be able to get a waiver for work requirements. Our statutes require that we have this program. HR 1 expanded who is required to meet the able-bodied adults without dependents work requirements. They expanded it from 18 to 54 to 18 to 64, so added 10 years of folks that would have to meet work requirements, and then also expanded it to parents over the age of 14. It used to be parents of children 18 and younger, or 17 and younger. Additionally, HR 1 eliminated certain exemptions that are really important to this population. And to you all on the phone, veterans are no longer exempt from work requirements, folks that are homeless. And then it also took away an exemption for children that are aging out of the foster care system to not have to work until they were age 24 to also receive the benefit. I think it's really important to note that work requirements don't prevent people from working. It forces people to work or to meet the work requirement in order to receive their benefits. The work requirement is 80 hours per month, and that is a combination of work, school, or volunteering. And one of the things that we're really concerned about isn't that people aren't doing it. We know that people work on the SNAP program. It's their ability to verify that they are doing it consistently. And so that is really, we think that folks will be what we called procedurally dropped from the program because they can't get the paperwork right. The second big challenge is to HR 1 is a challenge to funding. One thing that's not listed on here is that our SNAP education program is no longer funded per HR 1 and will terminate on September 30th of this year. But the two biggest changes to the funding are the administrative cost share and the benefit cost share. Again, the administrative cost share starts this October, and it will reduce the amount that the federal government reimburses for the administration of our program. It used to be 50-50. Now the state and our counties will have to cover 75% of the administrative burden, and the federal government will reimburse us for 25%. Excuse me. The next big piece is the benefit cost share. This is really wonky. I'll just go ahead and put that out there. But starting October 2027, states may be required to pay a portion of the benefit cost each year based on our SNAP payment error rate. This is an estimated $420 million annually, a risk of about $420 million annually for North Carolina. If we do not pay our share of the benefit cost share, we will lose our program. That is what we understand from the lawyers and kind of a general consensus across the United States. And I'll pause for ASL transition. Okay, great. So the benefit cost share happens in tiers. So if we're able to keep our payment error rate less than 6%, we will have 0% cost share. If our payment error rate is between 6 and 8%, there'll be a 5% cost share, with in North Carolina is about $140 million. If our payment error rate is between 8 and 10%, we'll be looking at a 10% cost share. And then if our payment error rate is over 10%, we're looking at a 15% cost share. When we look at our federal fiscal year 24 statistics, North Carolina's payment error rate was 10.21%, which would put us in that bottom tier. Our unofficial federal fiscal year 25 rate, which is actually what we will use potentially in the first year beginning in October 2027 for that first federal fiscal year. Our rate right now is reported at 7%, 7.01%, which would put us in that 5% cost share. We still have to get our final number from the federal government, but I am feeling confident that we're going to stay in that 5% cost share. It's important to know what actually is a payment error rate. A payment error rate is an incorrect benefit determination. It results in an overpayment to a household or an underpayment to a household. All payment errors are recouped or corrected. So if we were overpaying a family $50 a month for 4 months before we discovered it, they would have to pay back 4 times 50, which is $200 over a period of time. So all of this money is recouped 100%. The payment error rate, which is a calculated rate, is the total value of all the overpayments and underpayments divided by the total value of payments distributed. And this is done in a sample of about 1,000 cases that we look at for North Carolina. We have a state office that does a first deep dive into about 1,000 cases. And then we send that information to our federal partners, and they look at about half of our cases and see if we did a good job or not, essentially. Payment error rates are driven by unintentional mistakes that are made at the county or the client level. And in federal fiscal year 25, we found that 55% of our payment error rates were caused by the county or the agency, the DSS agency, and 45% were caused by clients. Now, what does this mean? This might mean they calculated, a county worker calculated someone's income wrong. So they reported that they're paid weekly, and instead of multiplying the weekly amount times 4.33, which is how many weeks are in a month, they multiplied it by 4.0. And so there's just a little bit of something off in the work that gets done. Or a client misreports that, oh yeah, no, I don't work for Uber. And then in a couple months later, between their recertification periods, which is every 6 months for us, they pick up a job with Uber, and they forget to report that new income. So those are what payment errors are, or that's how they're derived, is they're accidents. Kind of thinking about our historic and future payment error rates, we have come down significantly from 23 and 24. Again, in federal fiscal year 25, we're looking at our state reported rate at about 7.01%. Again, we send our state determined rate to the federal government and they double check us. We do think that it will be regressed up slightly. Our rate will be regressed up slightly because they have one finding that we didn't have, and then we weren't able to completely complete our case, which is also a wonky little number. But I do think it'll stay below 8%. Our goal for federal fiscal year 26 is to be below 6%. That's going to be our goal forever and always. And so we really have to work hard in order to get to that goal. This work is happening at the state level and in partnership with our county DSSs. We have to do it together. At the state level, we have kind of three big work streams. One is policy and training. Two is technical assistance and continuous quality improvement. And our third is information technology. We're of two minds with this work. One mind is how do we clean and help our current caseload so that our federal fiscal year 26 number can be as low as possible. My next question that kind of sits in my dual part of my brain is how do we prevent future errors from happening? How do we make it so that our system does not have any errors in it? And so that's kind of the dual lenses that we focus on at the state when we think about this work. So in the policy and training side, on the left side, these slides are all set up similarly. On the left side, you're going to see kind of big milestones that we're doing and big goals. And on the right side, it's like, what is our day-to-day work today? So first, when HR 1 was passed in July of 2025, we had to update DHHS's policies with the HR 1 eligibility changes. And we also had to update our IT system, which you'll see later on. Then we had to train staff on what were the changes in eligibility and how do you do this. Simultaneously, we began to assess what are our common payment errors and how do we prevent those. Once we identified that, we're doing updates to our system, which I'll talk about, but we also trained our county staff on some of those errors and how you prevent them. One thing that we've seen is that our interviewing is not strong any longer. In COVID, we didn't have to do interviews, and that skill set really kind of left with the change in workforce that we all saw when COVID happened, as older folks retired, and as that skill was not being used through COVID. We've seen that our interviewing needs to really improve. Our current initiatives include developing a new interview guide, and also creating a policy bot that's going to help our county DSS workers in the moment. When they have a question about policy, they pop the question into our online policy bot, and they'll be returned the actual policy information so that they don't have to remember our policies that are mainly predicated on federal policy, but can be very, very detailed and do change over time, especially, for example, changes to the eligibility requirements. In the technical assistance and continuous quality improvement work, we really first focused on who is doing well and why are they doing well? How do we spread that information to the other counties? We've been conducting on-site visits and providing improvement recommendations with 15 of our lower performing counties. What that looks like is that we watch a full day and a half of work that's happening at the county, and we can find some kind of low-hanging fruit of things that need to be improved, and we provide those recommendations to the counties. Additionally, we have onboarded a contractor called Human Services Group who's going to do intensive work with 8 of our counties to really move their practice forward and to systemically fix issues that we're seeing there. And then on our IT side, this is really where we think about, like, how do we fix issues today and how do we prevent issues in the future? So one example is we saw that folks had multiple rents included in their shelter deduction. So SNAP is determined, the benefit amount is determined by the amount of income minus the amount of deductions. We saw that people had too many deductions that didn't make sense. So we closed those deductions in about 3,000 cases. And then we also changed our system so that a eligibility worker can't accidentally not end last year's rent when they put in a new rent for this year. So those are just some steps we're taking to support our system and to support our workers. I'm running tight on time, but I did want to flag just a couple things that need to happen for federal action. Ideally, federal action kind of advocacy could be around allowing states to delaying the benefit cost share to federal fiscal year 30 instead of starting in federal fiscal year 28. Poor performing states are already going to get this delay. Moving the needle on payment error rate is slow work. North Carolina reduced our error rate by 30% in 1 year, but we need more time to be able to implement these systemic changes effectively. Additionally, this coming year, if there's another resolution bill instead of a true budget bill, we're very worried that they might eliminate what's called broad-based categorical eligibility, or BBCE. This is really going to hurt working families that make over 130% of the federal poverty level, but have large deductions. So BBCE allows families and individuals that make between 130% of FPL and 200% of the federal poverty level eligible for SNAP. At the state level, we're really hoping that they're going to fund our administrative cost increases and that they will commit to funding the annual cost benefit share if our payment error rate is greater than 6%. And in the short term, we're going to need investments, additional financial support to drive down the payment error rate because these things aren't free, unfortunately. All right, Mary, that was my lightning fast way of doing this. I'll turn it over with 5 minutes left.
Well, you did a great job, and I like the way you broke it down. People have heard me say before, in a former life, I did food stamp eligibility, and it is really, really hard to get that error rate down. I mean, you're dealing with human beings, and it is very challenging. I think the amount of money that this could cost the state as well as counties is just mind-boggling. And, we take the conversation about potential loss of local revenue with property tax changes on top of something like this coming down the pike too. Plus, I mean, it's going to be a big hit to the state budget if we aren't allowed to delay some of these things. So it's a big thing, and it impacts so many people in our state. What questions do you guys have for Jill?
I just wanted to thank Jill. This is Sandra, for just putting that in. It's not a glamorous topic, but it is an essential topic, and I think she did a great job of kind of explaining, even to those of us who have been reading about all the things that are happening or may happen because of the HR1, and I think the way you laid it out kind of helped explain the different levels of work that has had to be done on the state level to even get to this point, let alone where we'll be in the next year.
Thanks.
Yeah. I think when we hear about some big thing passed at the federal level, we don't kind of get the implications until you begin to hear presentations like this. Janice, your question?
Not a question, just a comment. We just had our first mature workers job fair. And we had 77 folks that came. And I think that's just an indication of, folks trying to find a job so they can keep their benefits. Yeah.
I think that's right. It is really sad. Work requirements will be new on the Medicaid side for the Medicaid expansion population, and that requirement will go into effect January 1st, 2027. So not only will folks need volunteer opportunities, job opportunities, work, training opportunities, et cetera, for their SNAP benefits, but folks will also need it for their Medicaid benefits. If you work with nonprofits, think about nonprofit work, et cetera. If it is not free to have volunteers, and I'm not saying that, but it might be a great investment in your community to figure out how you could bring on some additional workers or volunteer opportunities and be really committed to completing the paperwork. That I think is going to be really hard for folks on top of getting those opportunities and showing up every day and doing what is being asked of them is just really the documentation. And also aligning with your DSSs to let them know, hey, we have space for volunteers. I think that those are really great ways that you can contribute to being a solution here, even in this time that feels like really hard.
That's a very good point. Yeah, and we've had discussion today about the debate going on regarding whether or not to lower the tax rate in North Carolina even lower. So discussions like this tie into that also. And we haven't even talked about the potential cuts to Medicaid in North Carolina, what that's going to cost the state. The projection when the One Big Beautiful Bill passed was it's going to be $50 million loss in revenue over $50 billion loss in revenue over 10 years. So it's a big thing for sure. Well, Jill, thank you a whole lot. Thank you guys for being here today. We had a very meaty meeting, I think, and lots of good information. Jill, if you don't mind sharing your slides with me or Sandra, whatever, so we can get them out to folks, that would be great. And just thank you guys for what you're doing, and take all this good information and chew on it and keep your advocacy hats on. So thanks again. Have a great month. And just one other thing, our next meeting is going to be a week early because of the Memorial Day holiday. So it is actually going to be on May 15th from 10 to 12. Yeah. And this is going to be a joint meeting as we've had the last couple of years with North Carolina Serious Illness Coalition. So we will, they'll be joining us for this. So take care. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.